When you are traveling, photography does not happen in perfect conditions. The light changes, the streets get crowded, the subject moves. You may have only a few seconds to capture the shot, and in those moments, the right lens can make the difference between getting the memory or missing it completely. This is why the best travel lens is not the one that looks perfect on paper. It is the one that stays ready when a trip gives no second chance. Welcome to AltBuzz Lenses. If you are new here, subscribe now, because this is the kind of guide that actually helps you decide before you spend. At number 10, we have the Sigma 18 to 50mm f2.8 DCDN Contemporary. And before anyone questions why short zoom opens this list, here is the answer. Because travel gear does not have to be large to feel serious. This lens is built for APS-C mirrorless systems, and it does something that most travel zooms refuse to do at this size. It holds a constant f2.8 aperture across the entire range. That means whether you are shooting a wide street scene or pulling in slightly for a food shot or a casual portrait, the lens stays bright. It does not punish you for zooming in. Most travel zooms do exactly that. They start reasonably fast and turn slow the moment you need reach. This one does not. The range is not dramatic. 18 to 50mm on APS-C gives a full frame equivalent of roughly 27 to 75mm. That is a solid everyday focal length, useful for streets, interiors, portraits, quick video clips, and the kind of unhurried travel photography that happens between destinations. But it will not bring distant mountains closer. It will not isolate a subject from across a piazza. Its strength is something quieter than reach. It keeps the camera light, fast, and ready for the moments happening right in front of you. For APS-C creators who want a simple, capable setup without extra weight, this lens understands the assignment. At number 9, we have the Canon RF-S 18 to 150mm f3.5 to 6.3 ISS-TM. And this one is not trying to be glamorous. It is trying to be useful, which, on a real trip, is worth far more. This lens was built for Canon APS-C mirrorless cameras, the R50, the R10, the R7, shooters who want one lens that covers everything without thinking too hard about it. And in that role, it genuinely delivers. 18 to 150mm on APS-C gives a full frame equivalent of roughly 29 to 240mm. That is wide enough for landscapes and tight streets, long enough for architecture details, travel portraits, and distant subjects, in one lens, in one lightweight package, with image stabilization built in. The aperture is variable, f3.5 at the wide end, narrowing to f6.3 at the long end. In good light, that is perfectly workable. In low light, it starts to show limitations, but here is the honest truth about this lens. It is not the one photographers buy to impress other photographers. It is the one they bring when they actually want to enjoy the trip and still come home with the shots. It removes the decision fatigue. It removes the weight guilt. And for Canon APS-C travelers who want convenience, range, and a genuinely simple kit, that is exactly the travel problem it was built to solve. At number 8, we have the Fujifilm XF 16 to 80mm f4 R OIS WR. And for Fujifilm shooters, this lens hits differently because it does not just cover the range, it preserves the experience. Fujifilm cameras have always had an identity, tactile, compact, film simulation driven, a certain kind of joy in using them. And some lenses, even good ones, can undermine that identity by making the camera feel bulky and corporate. This lens does not. It sits naturally on an XT or XS body. It handles without feeling front heavy. And it covers a full frame equivalent of roughly 24 to 120mm, a range that works for nearly every travel situation. Street scenes, landscapes, travel portraits, food, architecture, and the kind of handheld long day shooting that would exhaust a heavier system. The constant f4 aperture keeps performance consistent across the zoom range. The optical stabilization handles camera movement on cobblestone streets and moving vehicles, and the weather resistance means dust, light rain, and unpredictable conditions are not automatic threats. It is the kind of lens that lets a Fujifilm camera stay what people love about Fuji: compact, tactile, and ready for real-world storytelling. For Fuji shooters who want practical range without turning their camera into a heavy travel burden, this is the lens that understands the system. At number 7, we have the Panasonic Lumix S 28 to 200 mm f4 to 7.1 macro O.I.S. And this one surprises people because most full-frame travel zooms either sacrifice size for range or sacrifice range for quality. This lens quietly refuses that trade. For Lumix full-frame L-mount shooters, finding a compact travel zoom has historically been a challenge. Full-frame lenses tend to be large lenses are heavy. Heavy lenses make long travel days physically difficult. This lens changes that conversation. It covers 28 to 200 millimeters, a genuinely wide travel range, in a package that feels almost too small for what it delivers. Add optical stabilization, and the result is a lens that handles handheld shooting, moving scenes, and unsteady conditions with more confidence than its size suggests. The aperture is the honest compromise here. It starts at f/4 and narrows to f7.1 at the long end. In low light at 200 millimeters, that is a real limitation. Evening shots at full zoom will push the sensor harder, but this lens was never designed to win a low light contest. It was designed to survive an entire trip without making the photographer change lenses. And it adds something unexpected: close focus, macro-style capability that makes it genuinely useful for food, textures, product details, and the small travel moments that often go unrecorded. For Lumix full-frame travelers, this lens understands that travel is not always about perfect conditions. Sometimes it is about being ready for anything. At number 6, we have the OM System M.Zuiko 12 to 100 mm f4 IS Pro. And if compact APS-C lenses solve one kind of travel problem, this lens shows why smaller sensor systems still have a serious advantage when the trip gets physically demanding. Micro Four Thirds gets underestimated. People hear smaller sensor and assume inferior results. But travel photography is not a controlled studio exercise. It is a moving, sweating, uphill 12-hour experience. And in that environment, the system that keeps working when everything else becomes uncomfortable has a real advantage. This lens gives the equivalent of 24 to 200 millimeters, an enormous range, in a constant FE4 package with some of the strongest in-lens stabilization available anywhere. Pair it with an OM System body's in-body stabilization, and the combined result is handheld shooting that most other systems cannot match without a tripod. The build is PRO grade. It handles cold, dust, moisture, and the kind of outdoor punishment that adventure travel delivers: hiking trails, mountain passes, coastal weather, monsoon streets. This lens does not ask for ideal conditions. It was built for the opposite. Travel is not always about the biggest sensor. Sometimes it is about the system you can actually carry all day. And this lens is proof that when the road is long, the bag is heavy, and the shot will not wait. A smaller system with the right lens can outlast and outperform gear that looks more impressive on a spec sheet. If you enjoy lens guides that go beyond sharpness charts and actually talk about how photographers use gear in the real world, subscribe to AltBuzz Lenses. We cover modern lenses, forgotten glass, and the tools that genuinely shape the way people shoot. Hit subscribe so you do not miss what is coming next on this list. At number 5, we have the Sony FE 20 to 70mm f4G, and the number that matters most here is not 4, it is 20. Most full-frame standard zooms start at 24 millimeters. That is the established starting point, wide enough for landscapes, practical for everyday shooting. But 24 millimeters has a ceiling. Walk into a narrow alley, a cathedral interior, a small restaurant, or a hotel room worth photographing, and 24 millimeters can feel tight. 20 millimeters does not have that problem. Those 4 extra millimeters change the spatial relationship between the camera and the scene. More sky, more foreground, more context, more of the story in the frame. This lens was built for modern travel creators who understand that a trip is not only about still photography anymore. It is about vertical clips for social media, wide establishing shots for video sequences, documentary-style handheld footage, and indoor scenes that need room to breathe. The Sony FE 20-70mm f4G delivers that in a compact, well-built package that does not feel like a compromise on a Sony full-frame body. It will not reach distant subjects. Wildlife and travel portraits from across a square are not its strength. But for the photographer who wants the whole street, the whole room, and the whole story in the frame, this is the travel lens that feels modern, because it was designed for the way travel content actually gets made now. At number 4, we have the Canon RF 24-105mm f4L IS USM. And some lenses earn their place not by being the most exciting option, but by being the one that never lets you down. This is Canon's full-frame travel workhorse, L-series glass. Constant f4, image stabilization. A range that starts wide enough for landscapes and reaches long enough for travel portraits, compressed city scenes, and architectural details. It handles video smoothly, focuses reliably, and behaves consistently across the kinds of mixed shooting situations that a full travel day always delivers. It is not the smallest lens on this list. It is not the cheapest. But for Canon full-frame shooters who want to pack one lens and genuinely trust it for an entire trip, it earns that trust quietly. The L-series designation matters here, not just as a status marker, but as a practical promise. Weather sealing. Build quality that holds up to heat, humidity, and the rough handling that travel inevitably brings. Optical performance that does not visibly degrade as the day gets longer and the light gets harder. Some travel lenses impress with extreme specs. This one earns its place by quietly doing almost everything well enough that the photographer stops thinking about changing lenses and starts thinking about the shot instead. For Canon full-frame travelers, it is not the wildest RF lens available, but it is one of the easiest to trust when only one lens is going in the bag. Now we move into the lenses that are not just convenient, but strong enough to make photographers leave multiple lenses at home without feeling like they compromise too much. The next 3 lenses solve the travel lens problem at a different level, one that makes the decision to pack light feel like a genuine upgrade, not a sacrifice. At number 3, we have the Nikon Z 24-120mm UE4S. And for Nikon full-frame shooters, this lens answers a question that 24-70mm zooms have never fully solved. What happens when 70mm is not quite enough? The answer is reach. Not super telephoto reach, but practical travel reach. 120mm gives meaningful compression for portraits, gives detail pulling ability for distant architecture, and gives just enough telephoto range to make a photographer genuinely hesitate before reaching for a second lens. Combined with Nikon's S-line optical quality, a constant f4 aperture, weather sealing, and strong close focus capability, this lens positions itself as one of the most balanced full-frame travel zooms available from any manufacturer. It is not the smallest lens at this focal range. It has weight. It has physical presence. But travel photography at a serious level involves trade-offs. And the trade-off this lens asks for, some extra size in exchange for reach, quality, and confidence, is one that most Nikon shooters find easy to accept. A good travel lens should not make the photographer feel punished for leaving extra glass at home, and that is exactly why this lens matters. For Nikon full-frame users who want travel flexibility without feeling like they settled, the 24-120mm f4S is the answer that deserves to be in the top 3. At number 2, we have the Tamron 17-70mm f2.8 Di3A VC RXD. And this one does something that very few APS-C travel lenses manage to pull off. It refuses to make the shooter choose between brightness and range. Most travel zooms on APS-C systems follow a familiar pattern. They offer a wide zoom range, and they give it to you at the cost of a slow variable aperture. The logic is understandable. Wide range and fast aperture in one lens means size, weight, and cost. But for Sony E-mount and Fujifilm X-mount shooters who want a genuinely capable travel lens without crossing into full-frame territory, this lens breaks that pattern. 17 to 70 millimeters on APS-C gives a full-frame equivalent of roughly 25 to 105 millimeters. That is a serious travel range. And across that entire range, the aperture holds at f2.8. That constant brightness changes everything. Evening street scenes, indoor restaurant moments, low-light markets, portraits with real background separation, all of these become workable situations rather than compromises. The built-in vibration compensation helps with handheld stability, and the autofocus system handles moving subjects without drama. For travelers who want their kit to stay small but do not want every difficult light situation to feel out of reach, this lens is the reason APS-C systems remain genuinely competitive. It is not a consolation prize for people who cannot afford full frame. It is a deliberate, smart travel choice. And at number 1 is the lens that may not be perfect on paper, but understands real travel better than almost anything else on this list. At number 1, we have the Tamron 28 to 200 millimeter f2.8 to 5.6D Y3R XD. And this is the lens that earns the top position, not by being flawless, but by understanding what travel actually demands. For Sony full-frame E-mount shooters, this lens delivers a range that most photographers would need 2 or 3 separate lenses to cover, 28 to 200 millimeters. Wide enough for street scenes, long enough for wildlife and distant architecture, and here's the detail that separates it from typical super zooms. It starts at f2.8 on the wide end. That is not common. Most lenses that cover this kind of range start at f3.5 or slower and get significantly darker as the focal length increases. This one opens at f2.8 at 28 millimeters, which means wide shots, low light scenes, and evening photography. At the wide end, retain brightness that a typical super zoom cannot offer. The 28 millimeter wide end is the honest compromise. Compared to 24 millimeters, it can feel restrictive in tight interiors, narrow streets, and wide landscape scenes, where the foreground matters. That is a real limitation, and it should not be ignored. But against everything else, this lens delivers the reach, the bright wide end, the compact size for a full-frame super zoom, the ability to stay on the camera from morning to evening without a single lens change. That compromise becomes a trade-off most Sony full-frame travelers are willing to make. It is wide enough for most scenes, long enough for distant details, bright enough at the wide end, and small enough that a photographer might actually keep it on the camera for the whole trip. That is not a perfect lens. That is the right travel lens, and that is why it is number 1. 3 lenses that came close and deserve a conversation. The Canon RF-24 to 240 mm f4 to 6.3 IS USM is Canon's full-frame super zoom answer for shooters who want range above everything else. The variable aperture and some optical compromises keep it off the main list. But for Canon travelers who rarely shoot in low light and want one lens that covers nearly everything, it is a strong, practical option. The Nikon Z 24 to 200 mm f4 to 6.3 VR gives Nikon full-frame shooters more reach than the 24 to 120 mm at the cost of the f4 constant aperture. If wildlife, birds, and distant travel subjects matter more than low-light performance, it deserves serious consideration alongside the lenses that made the main list. The Sigma 16 to 300 mm f3.5 to 6.7 DCOS Contemporary is a dramatic statement for APS-C shooters, extreme range. One lens, one decision. The variable aperture at the long end is a genuine limitation in difficult light, but for travelers who want to cover every possible focal length without changing glass once, its ambition is hard to argue with. If practical lens stories, honest buying guides, and gear that actually matters in the field are what you come here for, subscribe to AltBuzz Lenses. Every guide on this channel is built around real decisions, real trips, and real photographers trying to figure out what is actually worth carrying. If this list helped, subscribe so you do not miss the next one. The best travel lens is not the one with the most impressive spec sheet. It is the one that fits the trip, the camera, the bag, and the way you actually shoot. Some photographers need reach, some need brightness, some need stabilization, some just need a lens light enough to carry all day. But the right travel lens does one thing better than anything else. It keeps you ready when the moment appears. Pack smart, shoot honestly, and never miss the shot because the gear was wrong. AltBuzz Lenses, for the ones who carry less and capture more.